Hello, all, and thank you for joining us today for the second act series from Kendal at Home. My name is Ryan Anderson. I'm the outreach manager here at Kendal at Home. Behind the scenes with us today is Sue Woykin. She is our marketing and events coordinator. And so she's going to be handling a lot of behind the scenes stuff for us all today, making sure that everything goes smoothly. If there's any questions that you have or comments, please feel free to throw those into the Q&A or chat feature, and Sue will be monitoring those for us today. Other housekeeping items in the top right-hand corner. You can change the view if you don't like how the view is showing up. Please feel free to change that as well there. And then as well, there is a transcript feature that we have down at the bottom. Please feel free to either turn that off, turn that on if you want, change the settings on that if you wish. So yeah, without further ado, we do have a special guest today. Marion Drummond is with us here. Marion is a lifelong pianist and has been teaching piano for a long time. So Marion, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories with us.
Well, I'll try to do a good job of telling some of my stories. Some of them are funny, and you can certainly laugh, but I enjoy sharing the wonderful life that I have had. Welcome to my music studio. This room has been a part of us. We've owned this house for 64 years, and the room, there was a room here, but we enlarged it and peaked the roof so that acoustically it worked very well for making music. I have taught piano lessons in this room for many years. There have been recitals here. There have been concerts here. There have been Friday Music Club meetings here with recitals, so that the room has been well used these many years, and I'm still using it. In my childhood, I was so fortunate. My mother was a pianist, a very fine pianist, and she taught in the home, so that when I was little, I heard a lot of piano lessons, and I loved the sound of the instrument, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so I begged my mother about age 3 to start having piano lessons. I've been doing that ever since. I still take lessons today. My father was a singer. He was a very talented tenor, and my parents frequently did local recitals for people, for organizations and so forth. My parents also went to many concerts. We lived in the Pittsburgh area, and there was a Pittsburgh Symphony, so I went to symphony concerts. And when there were other concerts, I went to those also. My brother was not interested, and that was okay. I don't know what he did, but he was not part of the music. In fact, when we were in school, it was decided, since mother was teaching so much in the afternoons, I couldn't practice in the afternoons, that I ought to do my practicing before I went to school in the morning. Well, my brother would go out the front door and slam it. That was too much. He had to listen to the piano all the time, too much. So anyway, when I was probably 10 years old, Eunice Norton, who was a Steinway concert artist, had been a child prodigy and had toured all over Europe and Russia. She moved to Pittsburgh, and she and her husband formed the Pittsburgh Friends of Music Concert Society. And my father ended up being the treasurer of that organization. So we went to all the concerts, and I went to the concerts also. I met people personally. They were often entertained in our home. Serkin, Schnabel, Fischer-Dieskau, Milstein, the Budapest String Quartet. There were others. It was a fascinating experience. So I was obviously involved with music and loved it from a very early age, and still do. When it was time for me to think about going to college, My mother had studied in France, Paris, excuse me, Paris for 2 years. So she didn't really know anything about college or what I might want to do or what I might like. And so she had a friend who had graduated from Oberlin and as a piano major. And so it was decided we'd check out Oberlin. So I came to Oberlin. I had an audition and I was assigned, I didn't know any of the faculty members, so I was assigned to a teacher. And when we first met, he asked me, what are you wanting to do with this? And I said, well, I really don't know, but I know I don't want to teach.
And now here you are so many years later
Here I
doing
am,
exactly what you said.
Many years later, that was absolutely true. Well, the teacher that was chosen for me, that didn't work out very well. And at Christmas time, I went home and played for my parents and Eunice Norton. And it was decided I should leave Oberlin. I stayed here long enough to meet my future husband, but I transferred to Pennsylvania College for Women, which is now called Chatham University. It's no longer just for women, it's co-ed. And it's very, very different from the school that I went to. Anyway, I was going to study with Eunice Norton off campus. So I was not getting any credit for my piano work. It meant that I could not perform as a pianist on campus because I wasn't studying there. So I was a voice major and a music theory minor. At one point, probably when I was in high school, I started taking voice lessons because I was used to having my father practice voice and so forth, and I sang in choirs and so forth. And my dad said to me, Marion, there are lots of pianists. There are people who have special voices, need to use them. I think maybe you should be a vocal major. Well, I continued my long life doing both and have enjoyed both. Sometimes I feel that I have been more successful as a soloist on the piano. Why? Because when you sing, you have to breathe. And breathing makes you more relaxed. And I could be very nervous when I was playing. So we'll see how that worked out. But I did graduate from Chatham as a with a Bachelor of Arts.
And so now you talk about all these stories, everything there. And so you went to Oberlin, you started your more professional music career with Oberlin, it sounds like, and then you carried on. But it seems like there was a common theme of Eunice Norton as your piano teacher.
Absolutely.
And so, if I remember correctly, you told me that you came back, and a big pull for you to come back was Eunice being able to instruct you for everything. What was so special about, and you mentioned her a little bit with her child prodigy and things like that. What was so special about Eunice, either the person she was, the pianist, or the way that she taught that always drew you back there?
Well, she was an amazing pianist to begin with. She lived the music. It wasn't just technical. It was making music. The music had shapes. It was not percussive. It takes me back. I have to tell you a story of when I was little. I was maybe in the 3rd grade, and the teacher was talking about the instruments in the orchestra. What family does a violin belong to? That's a string family. Well, what's a flute belong to? Oh, that's a woodwind. Well, what's a piano? And I raised my chubby little hand and I said, I know. And she said, yes, Mary. And I said, the piano is a string instrument. She said, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, obviously it must be. There's strings in there, right?
Right. However, it is a percussion instrument. So I ran home from school that day to my mother and it shared.
Ryan, we're having trouble with the audio. I apologize. We're having a little trouble with the audio. We can't hear her, Ryan.
Let's try this here. See if we try this. Bring it up closer. This is a little bit better. Is this better?
Slightly. It's a little muffled.
Is it?
Can you hear us now?
Perfectly.
Perfect. Okay. Apologies all. It looks like the volume settings got changed up and it changed microphones on us. So Marion, you were starting to talk about these beautiful Steinway pianos that you
Yes.
have with us. So you're saying how one was yours as a college graduation gift.
Yes,
The other one was your mother's.
that's
So
true.
Steinway, obviously, if you're very familiar with the piano, you know what a Steinway is. But for those that are not as familiar with what a Steinway is,
Mhm.
what's so important about it being a Steinway?
A Steinway is literally handmade.
Mm.
It's not an assembly job like we can think of in so many factories today, particularly in our country. It is made by hand. Actually, let me tell you a little bit about Steinway. When I graduated from college in 1953, I learned that the Steinway company was already 100 years old. It was started by a man named Steinweg, W-E-G at the end instead of Way. He lived in Germany. He was a cabinet maker. He was doing handwork carefully, by hand, okay? He was making clavichords, which were an early keyboard instrument, a small piano. He was making those. The first one he made was in his kitchen at home. Then in history's time, there was what they called the potato famine. People in Germany were losing jobs. They were losing food. And so there was a tremendous immigration to the United States. And it wasn't the sort of rigmarole that you have to go through today to come to immigrate into the United States. he just got on a boat and went.
Mhm.
He arrived in New York.
Mhm.
He rented a loft, and because there were other Germans around him, he didn't have to learn English. They just all kept speaking German. And they began making instruments. Now, not some of them were the clavichords, some were hand instruments,
Mhm.
and he began making pianos. Then other members of his family began coming,
Mhm.
and it has turned out now there have been 5 generations of Steinways who have lived in New York,
Mhm.
working for the Steinway Company. It has grown so much that they now have warehouses. And years ago, in 1926, my parents were in New York, still living there, and they wanted to get a better piano for my mother. And so they went to the Steinway factory, and there was a warehouse full of instruments, all different kinds.
Mhm.
I mean, and they tried a number of them. They knew what their budget was. And so they chose a Chickering, a small grand piano that would fit in their apartment. And the salesman said to my parents, they had enjoyed, or he had enjoyed so much my mother's playing these instruments, he would like to give my mother a thrill. The downstairs was another warehouse where they had all the instruments, the finest instruments that they had created. It takes a whole year to make a Steinway.
Okay.
And these instruments downstairs were marked CBs, B being the size, C being because they were to go into a concert hall.
Mm.
Okay, there was one there that had not been placed in a concert hall, and he wanted my mother to have an opportunity to play that instrument. So they went downstairs, and Mom played the instrument, and my dad cried. He was just so thrilled. And he said, "What do you mean? I can't buy this instrument?" The man said, "No, it's to be placed in a concert hall for a Steinway concert artist." Well, my father wined and dined this man. And eventually it turned out my parents bought the instrument. And I have lived with that instrument for the rest of my life. Now my piano, the one that is behind me, had been placed in Pittsburgh, was with the Pittsburgh Symphony for their concert artists when they came to play. And Steinway usually made a deal whereby every 7 years or so, they replaced those concert instruments. And it was time to replace it.
Mhm.
And so my parents saw an ad in the paper that this instrument was going to be sold. They told me, oh, they were going to go and look at this. Well, a couple days later, what did you think? Not right, my mother said, not right. Well, the time came in May, probably the end of May, when I gave my senior voice recital, because of course, being a voice major at Chatham, PCW,
Mhm.
I was able to give a senior recital.
Okay.
And my parents were there, Eunice Norton was there, my classmates were there, the faculty members were there. It was a joyous occasion. And afterwards, my parents brought me a bouquet of flowers.
Mhm.
And I'm holding them and thanking them. And so we're talking and chatting, a fun
Yeah.
time with people. And my mother said to me, "Marion, have you opened that card?" And I said, "No, Mom, I'm busy." Well, she said, "Oh, please open that card." Well, I opened the card and I still have it. It said, on June 6th, a Steinway BC is being delivered to our home for your graduation. My voice teacher was a little disappointed.
Mhm.
I think he thought that I was going to go on to graduate school as a voice major.
Yeah.
But so when the piano was delivered, my mother's piano, which had been in the living room, it was a 40-foot living room, a beautiful, beautiful living room for music. It went downstairs to the basement,
Mhm.
and my mother's piano technician was going to do some work on it down
Yeah.
there. And my new piano was placed in the living room. So I gave my senior piano recital in my parents' home and on my own piano.
Wow.
Yeah, this
So,
even makes me cry now. So I have been blessed. Well, I do want to tell you something about, I mean, Chatham was not an ugly place to be at all. They did wonderful things for me. They knew of Eunice Norton. She had played on campus.
Mhm.
And they knew that I was being a voice major because I was studying off campus with her. And the practice rooms at Chatham were pretty lousy, not like the ones we have here at Oberlin. It was very, very different. And so what they did was they called people that they knew who had pianos,
Mhm.
Steinways, in their homes, not because they were musicians, but because it was a status symbol to have a Steinway piano in your home. It was beautiful to look at, whether you heard it or not, it was still beautiful to look at. So they made arrangements so that I, every day that I wanted to, could go to these homes and practice. We set up a schedule and it worked beautifully.
Mhm.
That was a very, very special thing, truly, truly. Let's see, what else did I want to say?
So I'm looking at the pianos that you have. And
Yeah.
now, obviously, as you're talking about Steinway, to have one Steinway, as you're saying, is a status symbol. To have two is an amazing thing to have, two, and two concert hall ones as well.
That is true. That is,
Particulars. What are some of the peculiarities in some of the, either to make it either a concert piano or some of the peculiarities that you have within your own instruments here?
well, what they say is that there are no two Steinways alike.
Mm.
Each one has its own personality, its own sound, its own variable as far as the touch. And when they had this warehouse downstairs with all the concert instruments, artists would come in and try them and make suggestions.
Mm.
You know, oh, something with the action here. Oh, yeah, that pedal, can you do something with that? So they made suggestions and then the company would work on it. They would make changes. So that with my instrument here, it was tested by Joseph Hoffman, who was a concert Steinway pianist. And they had changed the pedaling and the touch on the keyboard. They called it accelerated action. And he tested it and he liked it.
Mm.
And so his signature was on the brass plate inside my piano, saying that he approved of this.
Mm.
So I have one of the first instruments that had the accelerated action. That was very special. It takes a year for a Steinway to be made, and it has to go through many periods. It's not an assembly line. It goes through a section for this, for doing the curve in the frame. Another section where they're working simply on the action. Maybe they're just working simply on the hammers and the felt that's on the hammers. Then back a long time ago, can't do it now.
Mhm.
We had Ivory on the keys. Interestingly enough, Ivory is no longer permitted.
Mhm.
And somebody told me, actually, I had the keys changed on this,
Mhm.
and these are not Ivory. I can't tell the difference.
Hmm.
But these are not Ivory. I had the same thing done with my mother's piano. The Ivory is no longer there.
So why the Ivory in the first place then? If you can't tell the difference, what's so special?
The feel. It doesn't slip. It doesn't slip. It responds. It responds. You don't play with the end of your finger, with the nail and that sort of stuff. You play with these little cushions.
Mhm. The little
They-
paws of your finger at the very top.
exactly. And they are very sensitive. And how you touch that makes the quality of sound that you want or that you don't want.
Now, so when you're saying quality of sound, you've talked about string instrument versus percussion instrument. You said earlier how You will never view it as not a string instrument to it. So what do you mean by that? What's the different sounds that you can make with the piano? Because I hear piano, I'm just hearing keys and hammers and stuff like that. What are you hearing?
Well, I said I wasn't gonna do that. If I'm going to play, you notice my fingers are on the key.
Mhm.
Okay, now let me play it differently. That's a hit.
Okay,
That's not a beautiful warm sound.
that's an early beginner playing.
That's true. That is true. And if I want a staccato, I'm still playing from the surface. I'm not hitting.
It's not a sharp hit, it's a brush.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. My teacher would say, I'm gripping the key. I'm
Okay.
gripping the key with the pad.
Mm,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
neat.
and soft. And so when you talk about this accelerated action,
Yes,
what does that allow you to do?
to be more subtle.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can control,
Mhm.
control the intensity of your grip to the key.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
Um,
working through like either between like a coarse or a fine, like movements and stuff like that. It allows you to be a lot more fine, a lot more precise. And
that is true. That is true. Yeah.
okay.
Paul and I were talking this morning when I was reminding myself that Steinway Company was made in 1853. Okay. At that time, the company was already 100 years old.
Mm.
Look where they are now. Look where they are now. They're still making, my daughter and her husband just bought a smaller than this
Mhm.
Steinway, and it has a piano player in it.
Hmm.
And they can record with that instrument without using all the stuff that Paul uses to record things
Yeah.
here. Yeah, they're constantly doing new things,
Okay.
constantly doing new things. It's very, very exciting, truly. Yeah. There was another funny story that I was going to share. It was my senior year of college,
Mhm.
and I was in the music building,
Mhm.
and I heard someone they had a small concert hall with a nice piano in it, and I heard someone playing, and so I peeked in the door,
Mhm.
and I saw a senior. She was actually an organ major,
Mhm.
and I saw her, and she was playing the piano. It was I knew it was a piece of Chopin, but it was not a piece that I had studied. And so I went over nearby, and I made some suggestions as to how she was doing the bass and the kind of sound that she needed in the top. And then I looked up. My God, her teacher was sitting in the back of the room. I left as quickly as possible. I waved to the woman. I knew her. We were friendly. I waved, but I took off. I went back to the dorm, and my roommate was there. She was not a musician at all.
Mhm.
But I said, Sally, I just gave my first piano lesson, and I loved it. And I have been teaching ever since.
So that went in direct contrast to what you had told your professor on day one
Exactly.
of what you wanted to do. I'm never teaching, and then you finally get the opportunity to teach, and this is amazing. This is what I have to do.
Yeah, well, it was natural.
Mm.
It was just, but it wasn't something that was taught to me.
Mhm.
It was something that I felt inside.
So what have been the memorable moments? Why have you've been teaching? So you were a senior in college, so you were in your early 20s there.
Yes.
And so you've been doing this for decades. Why have you continued teaching for so long? Even to this very day, you still have 2 pupils.
Yes, I do. I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people make music. And as long as they aren't banging, I'm happy. I never had to worry about with these 2 people. They don't bang. No, it's been a very, very enjoyable life. And I'm still continuing to do it. I said to them the other day when they were here for their lessons, I think you need a new teacher because I was getting a little cross because I was getting tired. But they said, no, we'll see you next week.
So now I think I remember you telling me some stories about some peoples that you have taught over the years.
Yes.
And different life-changing events that come from just being able to sit down and learn a piano and an instrument where others may have discounted them and not given them the benefit of the doubt to it, and to show their true educational powers to it. Do you remember the story that I'm referring to?
I don't in particular, but all what I can think of is that the joy of working on a one-to-one basis.
Mm-hmm.
I had a youngster who he was being raised by his grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
and they were doing a beautiful job. He was taking karate. He was learning how to be a
This is
guide.
actually the story I was referring to. So.
Okay, he was learning how to be a boy,
Cool.
and he was learning how to ride a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so they brought him for piano. They actually came from Vermilion. How they ever heard of me, I don't know. But so he began banging the piano. Well, at that point, Paul was living in Arizona and would come home in the summertime for a visit with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would hear Josh from year to year,
Mm-hmm.
and he heard all the difference in the world. By the time he was in high school, Josh was playing the piano musically. He was also the drum major in his marching band in the high school. I've forgotten what instrument he was
So he
playing.
stuck with the percussion instruments.
I guess that's fair to say, yes. But and he was much more outgoing. He was, yes, it helped him tremendously. Yeah, I've had wonderful relationships with my students, and many of them, they have children or they have grandchildren, and where do they come? They come here. It's been wonderful, really, truly wonderful. There's one other story that I had a letter recently from a former student who reminded me that she lived in Vermilion,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a Knabe upright. And she would practice. She was always very diligent about her practicing, but she said that when she would come here and have her lesson, that the feeling of the action of my instrument and the sound was so different that it sounded as though she hadn't practiced at all.
Mm.
And she was upset by that. I don't know if her daughter has that Knabe or if they have a different instrument at this point in time, but she is now teaching piano to that granddaughter. Yeah, which is cool. Yes, lovely.
It must be amazing for you to get to see the different generations. Too.
That is true. I have another student who was a very, very talented young fellow, a very handsome young man to be sure. And he played very well. His sister also studied with me. She played very nicely, but he was a little more talented on the piano. He is now doing Broadway shows in New York as a singer. He still plays the piano.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a reunion a couple summers ago. It was wonderful. Yeah, it has been very, very rewarding to me, and obviously it has meant something to the students to come here and learn about beautiful things, and get to know each other very well.
The fact that A, there was a reunion there, and B, that throughout the years, throughout the generations, they're still coming back to you.
That's true. That's true. It's truly wonderful. Truly wonderful.
So I know that you have some recordings that you have of your playing.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing them with us?
No, I'd be happy to do that.
Sounds good.
Paula put that
So,
on for us.
Paul here is Marion's son. He's going to help us with the technology in playing these recordings.
He doesn't play the piano, but he's a marvel about recording and digital things, and that's his profession.
A helpful profession to have from a pianist to have someone be able to
Well,
record it.
he has recorded all my students as well, 10 people from Friday Music Club, and we had the pandemic and couldn't meet in people's homes and so forth. It has worked out beautifully. The piece that Paul and I chose from this CD is the 15th Prelude from Chopin's collection of piano preludes.
So also that, Very, very beautiful. Very,
It's a beautiful piece.
it is. So what in particular about that piece made you want to record that and share that with us today?
Well, I had always loved that piece. And I had heard it before I ever studied it.
Mm-hmm.
I studied it with Eunice Norton,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved the dynamics of the piece. There's tremendous warmth, but there's also tremendous strength in parts of it. And I loved being able to make the difference in those sounds. And so Paul was the one who said, when we talked about doing part of a recording today, he chose that piece. And I'm glad he did. It's a beautiful piece. And it was nice to hear it again.
Absolutely. And Paul, thank you so much for helping us with that there. So with the piece, yeah, because with the piece too, I heard the waves come up and down throughout the whole time to it, with the deeper notes coming through with little staccato coming in there too,
Yeah.
with the
Notes, yes.
notes on that just echoing up above, just absolutely beautiful to it. So very nice. So that was Chopin Prelude 15. Is Chopin the preferred? I know you focus on classical. Who's your favorite composer? Is it Chopin? Do you go back and forth between a couple different composers?
Well, I think certainly since Paul has been here with me, that I have concentrated on Bach, on three-part inventions, which I had never studied before. I had done preludes and fugues with Eunice Norton. And so doing the three-part inventions gave me an opportunity to use what I had learned in studying the Bach pieces with Eunice Norton.
Because she was an expert in Bach.
That was her specialty. Bach and Beethoven, absolutely. Schubert also, but she did marvelously well. When she was young, she did premiere performances of contemporary pieces as well. I've never done that. And the other thing that I have been doing for me is that I have special pieces that I have studied with her that I have reworked. And so I've been doing Beethoven and Mozart. And I'm perfectly happy just doing those. Jean and I right now, Jean now with her new piano, she found a Chopin Prelude number 13, which my mother used to play, which I loved. She frequently played it for people when they came to the house, and they would ask her to play something. And she had it all memorized and so forth, and she would play it for them. And so Jean decided that she wanted to learn it. So she has started working on it. She's not practicing piano every day because she's a violinist. She's also selling real estate. Her life is very busy. But anyway, she has asked me different times, well, I'm having trouble. How do you finger that left hand? How do I play that? And I had not studied the piece, but I had heard it so many times, my ear knows how it needs to go. And so we're sort of doing a lesson online. Jean will play something and record it and send it to me. Or she'll do it something and I'm listening to her play it out live. And then I'll be on my piano and I'll suggest something for her to listen to. We're having fun. It's a new way for me to teach.
It takes away that distance to it there, where you're able to teach a little bit more electronically.
That's true. That is true.
So absolutely. So, and now if there's any questions or comments in the chat, please feel free to throw any questions in there. I'd be happy to address them. Marion, I know you've mentioned that you've been in this house for 64 years, I think you said here. With this piano, that was your graduation gift, being here for all of it. What has being in this Overland community meant to you as you continue the education? I know you and Bob were very connected to the conservatory here and everything there. What has it been being here made it so special?
There's such variety, such tremendous variety. I was never one to listen to a lot of contemporary music. It was dissonant. Maybe it could be percussive. And we would go to those concerts together. And I would probably say that I didn't like that piece, I don't need to hear that piece again. And his reaction would be, it's enough that you were here, which was beautiful. So I have experienced a lot of new things. Also here with the conservatory, I used to have to go into Pittsburgh to hear a string quartet, a soloist, a cellist. It's all here, and so much that I can enjoy. And now that things are getting a little more normal with the pandemic, I'm looking forward to being able to do that again. And it's wonderful that Paul enjoys going with me. So that's very special. I do want to add that Bob was in the music theory department here. He was an Oberlin graduate, started out as a piano major, and then changed his mind after he came back from World War II. He had been a chaplain's assistant, playing a little pipe organ in the back of a Jeep. And so when he came back, then he changed his major to organ. So he was a fine organist, but he taught music theory for 39 years in the conservatory. And part of that time, he was even associate dean of the con. So I have known faculty, I have known students, and have grown myself. It's been a marvelous experience, just wonderful.
Absolutely, you mentioned the variety too, to be able to hear very talented musicians.
Absolutely.
Times
And to get to know them, because if they're here for 4 years, you hear them more than once, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and you get to see the growth too. I have to imagine that there's massive growth too.
Yes, of course, So no, I'm very, very happy. I'm having a grand life still with my grand.
Grand life with the greats.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm seeing, is that a comment or a question there?
That was me just throwing a comment out to everyone to see if anyone had any questions for Marion. And I have not gotten any back at this point.
I think too, as we talk about why, there's different whys. You mentioned for you it was piano. Your daughter is violin, I believe, on it. Paul shifted more into the digital and everything there. Why do you think people pick different things in the paths that they pursue? I'm even thinking too with the
well, the sound. I remember one time, Itzhak Perlman commented that his little girl was fascinated with the sound of a flute. She wanted to study flute. And here he was, this fabulous, still is a fabulous violinist. And she wanted to play the flute. So now certainly the Suzuki program started here in the conservatory when my children were young. And there were a number of faculty families in the conservatory who enrolled their children in that program. Paul and Steve started when it first began. And then Jean was like I was with the piano. The boys were doing this. They were going to lessons. She went to their lessons. She wanted to be part of it. So I one time called Clifford Cook, who was in charge of the program, and said, okay, where is it? And he said, come right over. I tell you, the violin was no larger than this. So the next time the boys went into a lesson, here's this little girl trucking in, carrying her violin case and so forth. And she's the one who stuck with it. The boys didn't. Paul went to guitar, and Steve just is a listener. But it's been wonderful.
I think it depends too, like where you draw your interest and stuff like that. Whether from playing or listening.
Or what are your friends doing?
It can also be a big factor too, especially as kids are growing up.
Certainly, certainly my boys got interested
Steve was a hockey man.
Mhm,
Paul played hockey also. Steve became a goalie.
mhm,
He was a goalie all through college.
mhm.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think the one thing that I can be proud of is that we let the kids be themselves.
Mm.
We didn't say you've got to do this, that, and another thing. There may be some things you should not do, but as far as what they were interested in and what they were doing, I think we encouraged that.
Is
And they're
that-
all different,
Is that why you teach for all these years?
probably.
Well, Marion, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories.
Well, thank you.
It was lovely to it. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm not seeing any other questions there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to
We do
answer
have
them.
a
And
question.
I'm sure Marion would be happy to answer any questions later.
There's one thing that I could say that I didn't mention. I have a CD here called Note by Note that was made by Steinway and Sons. It's on the making of a Steinway. And it's fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. If anybody would like to borrow it, please just give me a call and I would be very happy to share it with you. I won't let you keep it forever, but I'd be very happy to share. Thank you.
Ryan, we have gotten a question.
Okay.
Why did you replace the ivory keys?
Why did I replace?
Why did you replace the ivory keys? You said ivory was different from
Well,
punch, but why-
sometimes they get cracked and discolored.
Okay, so it got a little cracked, a little discolored too, where you're like, you know what, I like the white keys on
Yes,
there.
that's
and be
true.
able
Yeah,
to-
right. Mhm.
Okay. And now why did you switch from ivory when you replaced it? Is it just because they don't make them?
You
anymore?
can't get the ivory. In fact, I couldn't even sell the ivory to somebody. I mean, they have all my old ivory keys at the conservatory. And so if somebody has one key that needs to be replaced and they've got a good one for my piano
Yeah.
that would work, they can use it in that respect.
Interesting.
But you can't sell it. You can't buy it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Should we want to talk about-
Well, we're saving ivory.
I guess, yeah, saving ivory on it.
I have another question, Ryan.
Yep.
Are the black keys made of ebony and were they also replaced?
No, they were not replaced. No, they're still in perfect condition.
Mm,
Yeah.
That's special that for all these years too, that you've been able to keep so much of the original.
That's true.
intact.
Now, there are marks, for instance,
Mhm.
not on this piano, but well, somewhere here. You can see the brown. Well, Eunice Norton's piano in her home was not ebony. I mean, the ebony is a stain.
Okay.
It's not a wood that comes that color.
Yep.
And at one time I had some work done on this piano and I had the front here refinished.
Okay.
And well, at this point in my life, that doesn't matter. That's okay. That's okay.
The case is up most of the time anyway. It
That's
probably
true.
doesn't matter to see that side.
No, that's true. Now, there are some nicks here.
Mhm.
I never did that.
Hmm.
I blamed my husband for that. Well, because he had very large hands.
Okay.
He didn't have long nails, but he had large hands. And it was easy for him to bump in here when he was coming up close.
Mm.
And that's all right. It doesn't bother me now. It bothered me for a while, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sue, any other questions?
No other questions coming in.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Paul, for assisting with the technology on it. Marion, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank
It
you.
meant the world. For anyone watching, we do have some upcoming events. A week from Friday, September 16th at 11 a.m. We are going to be hosting our coffee hour. It's going to be related to the Dobbs case and decision. It's going to be hosted by Jonathan Empton, who is a law professor emeritus over at Case Western Reserve University, who specializes in constitutional law. So he'll be able to kind of give a full-on in-depth analysis of kind of what's going on there with that, what it means ramification wise, and how it relates to the Constitution. And then the following week, the week of the 19th of September, is going to be National Falls Prevention Week. And so here at Kendal at Home, we are going to be doing a series of events related to falls prevention and how to kind of ways in which you can either modify your house to improve safety features, or other things that you can do, such as exercises that you can do to help improve balance and stability there to prevent falls. So very important topics there. So all of that is on our website, kendalathome.org, and under the course and seminars page. Or you can reach out to us as well, and we'd be more than happy to register you for those events. But again, Marion, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you all for listening.
Goodbye, Sue.